All right, we're live here. I wanted to talk about this because I was just talking about this the other day. There was this sort of rumor that a lot of the titles that are being developed internally within Microsoft have this sort of heavy handed approach from Microsoft. It's almost like the developers were creating and known to create these really amazing experiences. And I want to hyper focus in on Arcane here because there seems to be this trend where developers are known to create one particular style of game very well. Then they're acquired, and then there are all of these issues happening when it comes to their games, either changing, taking a long time, a lot of problems in the development cycle. And then we hear stories. But this one from Bloomberg today that just was released kind of hyper focuses in on what I'm talking about here. DeFloyd says, Morning, dude. What's going on, DeFloyd? Thanks for stopping by. So I want to touch on this article, and it really does bother me because I feel like I've been saying this for a while, and I've been feeling this for a while, and I don't really have any real proof of it until today. So once I go through this article, we're going to raise a lot of questions, a lot of concerns. Mine has always been that if a company has one particular focus, they're hyper focused in on one particular style of entertainment, then everything that happens is going to be affected by that. Even studios underneath of them that they own that do different things, they're going to feel that trickle down effect. If the boss is saying consistently that we like this, we want this is what we're about, then if you're not doing that and you're owned by them, there has to be some sort of effect on your productivity. And finally, today, we have some confirmation as to what's going on with one of those studios. And I feel like if this is happening with one of these studios, then it almost certainly has to be happening with maybe almost all of them at this point. So Bloomberg reported, and listen, I'm not a huge Jason Schreier fan, but a lot of times the stuff that he reports is correct. And I really jumped on this one because I felt like it kind of gave credence to what I've been feeling, talking about, and saying for a while now. So let's go through this article that was released and then we'll talk about it. It says Redfall started development in 2018. Arcane's Prey had been a flop. ZeniMax demanded microtransactions, and management wanted to make a game with broad appeal. It was pitched as a multiplayer Arcane game, but it was never clear what that would mean or how it would work. Arcane was always understaffed, but on Redfall, attrition also became a significant problem. By the end of Redfall's development, a whopping 70% of the Arcane Austin developers who worked on Prey were no longer there, according to people familiar, as well as Bloomberg's analysis. Now, here's what's really important. Veteran workers who weren't interested in developing a multiplayer game left in droves. I want to repeat that. Veteran workers who weren't interested in developing a multiplayer game left in droves. If they weren't interested in developing a multiplayer game, if they're the veterans at that team and they're not interested in creating a multiplayer game, who's telling them that they have to create a multiplayer game? I mean, it makes sense. We're the veterans in this studio. We don't want to make a multiplayer game. We leave in droves. Who's telling us that we have to make a multiplayer? Who's telling us that we have to make a multiplayer game? It's got to be Microsoft at this point. And when you look at Dishonored, when you look at Dishonored 2, when you look at Prey, which wasn't successful, all three of those games, I don't think anybody could argue, they are technically incredibly sound games with some amazing gameplay and level design. And then we go from all of that creativity with those games to Redfall. DeFloyd says, so much for the hands-off approach. Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm thinking here because How could 70% of the entire staff leave because they didn't want to work on a multiplayer project? Why wouldn't you listen to that 70%? Why wouldn't you say, you guys are the veterans? You guys made Here's why we purchased you in the first place. Why would we pick up this studio? Did we pick you up because we felt like you were going to conform to what we wanted in the future when it comes to video games? Why would they purchase a studio that made Dishonored, Dishonored 2, and Prey and expect them to create this amazing live service games as a service title? Why would that happen? Explain to me how that studio, other than Microsoft forcing them, explain it to me. Prove me wrong. How did that studio go from those games, Dishonored, Dishonored 2, Prey? They have they all have something in common, don't they? From the first to the second to the third. How did they go from that to then all of a sudden their next big project under Microsoft for Xbox is Redfall? How did that happen? How did 70% of the veteran staff leave by the end of that because they didn't want to work on a multiplayer project? Who told them that they have to work on a multiplayer project? It has to be Microsoft. And I'm not saying that Microsoft is incapable of creating a good video game. I just feel like Microsoft isn't interested in creating a good video game. They're interested in creating things that give them leverage and control and a ton of money with as little effort and expenditure as possible. Does everyone do that? I don't know. Does Nintendo do it? I don't see it there. Splatoon is their quote unquote live service game. It's incredibly successful and it's an incredibly complete package. Sony hasn't done it. They're talking about doing it. They're saying they're going to spend more money to do it in the future, but they've created some great video games. So, who is responsible for this? And when I saw this article, I felt like it points to that very specific problem. And I feel like it's a problem with management. I feel like it's a problem with Microsoft in general. I feel like it's a problem with their whole creative vision centered around one particular thing. DeFloyd says Steve Jobs said it best about Microsoft. Yeah, he was talking about, look, Steve Jobs hated Microsoft and Bill Gates. If you know the history, you're either on his side or you're not. But at the end of the day, I mean, I don't think you can deny at this point that a lot of these products, they are just soulless. Xbox Series, Xbox One X, I ran out to get that, didn't do anything. They did nothing with it. I mean, now we've got the series consoles, and it seems like we're waiting for them to do something. I hope they do something. I'm not trying to be doom and gloom. I'm not telling you don't enjoy your Xboxes. I have one. I purchased one. Why would I purchase it if I hated it? I was around before Xbox. I beta tested Xbox Live. NFL Fever was the game that we used to beta test that. So 21 years later, this is clearly not an evolution in terms of creativity from a studio, from a company, from a product. You purchase a video game console for the expectation of quote unquote playing video games. Yes, you can play third party games. Everybody does that. Where's the first party creativity and content? That's what's most important. And when I read this article, in particular, that line really stuck with me. Veteran workers who weren't interested in developing a multiplayer game left in droves. Why would you let those veteran workers at that company leave? If they're saying to you, we don't want to do this, this isn't who we are, why would you just say, see you later, and expect everything to be fine? How could it possibly work out that way? It doesn't make any sense for them to create anything other than what they've created in the past. They've created great single player games. And again, you got to ask yourself, why would you focus in on that particular studio? Why would you purchase them and then expect them to do something completely different than what they've done in the past? How did they go from doing those things to then all of a sudden doing something different? Who asked them to do that? DeFloyd said game was awesome. You're talking about which game are you talking about? Dishonored, Dishonored 2, Prey? But I mean, that's my point. How do you look at something like an Arcane and say, we're going to buy them? They make great single player, deep experiences with branching gameplay. But when we purchase them, we're going to expect them to do something completely different than what they've done in the past. And by the way, coincidentally, it jives with live service games as a service. I don't buy it. I feel like Microsoft absolutely has a heavy hand in what's created, how it's created, the timetable, the expenditure, and ultimately what it is. And that's basically just a games as a service, live service game. B Money says, what's going on? Where? Hey, B Money. I can send you the link in Discord. I don't know if it'll work. If you want to hop on, you can. Let me know. I don't even know if I have you in Discord, by the way. I think I do. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about this Bloomberg article. And I have to know, like if I'm wrong, tell me how I'm wrong. Tell me how Microsoft says we want to purchase a bunch of studios because we need content. We have to go out there and we've got to buy studios because if we don't, we won't have content. So what kind of content do we want? Well, hush, hush. We want games as a service. We want live service because that's who we are as a company. We're a service-based company. Windows is our ultimate expression of a service. We've never really created great single-player games from the ground up internally. So what do? We go out and we look for a live service company or a games as a service company. No, we purchase Bethesda. We purchased Ninja Theory. Okay, if we purchased Arcane, how did Arcane go from what they did to what they've done with Redfall? Whose fault is that? And when you couple in this article that says nobody there, basically 70% of the senior staff, the people with the most talent that have been there for the longest, none of them wanted to work on a live service game, a multiplayer game. So then who forced them to do that? Who told them that they had to do that? And who allowed all of those people to leave rather than say, hey, 70% of the people who work here are leaving because they don't like what they're working on. Maybe we should listen to them. It's got to be Microsoft. 3 Mile Island says, hey, Wary, sounds like Arcane got the initiative treatment. Microsoft haven't got a clue. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to be as positive as I possibly can because I'm really interested in the show that's coming up. And I feel like, and I know this is insane because people have told me that I'm insane, but the boy can only cry wolf so many times, right? So many times before even the boy who's crying wolf realizes that, man, I can't do this anymore. Nobody's going to believe me anymore. I've got to either produce a wolf or I've got to just go away and go to some other village where no one's heard of me and start over again. And I feel like they're at that point where they have to know that it's time to produce that wolf. And the wolf is first party content that's, really good and compelling and interesting. They've got to do that. I don't know if they're ever going to do it, but I feel like it's time. And I really, for a long time, have felt that the stuff that we're getting from Microsoft, and look, I'm not saying that they have to just do single player games that are really good or they have to match Sony, but, can I get just one? Can I get a new character that's created by them? Where is the new Marcus Phoenix? Where is the new Master Chief? There's almost zero characters that convey what Xbox is. There's nothing. There's no character. There's no franchise that you go from one generation to the next for. It's just not there, and I want it to happen. So I feel like when we see stories like this and you hear things like this, it lends credence to the fears that I have that with Microsoft, and I'm not talking about PlayStation. I understand that uh, it's kind of cool to sort of pivot to PlayStation and say, well, they're doing this or they did that. But again, If your friends jumped off a bridge, would you jump too? My mother always used to say that. He did it too. He did it too. That doesn't work. So we're talking about Microsoft. Microsoft for 21 years hasn't produced anything like that. And this article really, really, I don't want to say make me feel good, but at least what I've been thinking, what I've been seeing, what I've been feeling, because I've been playing games a long time, doesn't make me better or worse than anybody, but I just feel like I have more of a, I guess, insight into what the hell is going on based on the type of content that I'm seeing shift and change over time. Victor Alistine says, no, Microsoft did not force them. ZeniMax did. ZeniMax is an independent subsidiary. Listen, that's great. Okay. They're owned by Microsoft. Go to work and tell your boss, I want a job here, the job that I have, but you have no say in anything that I do at all. It just doesn't work that way. The world doesn't work that way. That's a pivot to defend Microsoft, and it's got to stop. 70% of the people don't want to work on what they were working on, and that's Redfall. Microsoft purchased them. They own them. Well, once they purchased them, you don't think all of those people said, hey, we don't want to work on this, what we've been working on. We don't want to work on it. Why wouldn't Microsoft say, hey, you guys, we purchased you because explain to me how a studio that makes nothing but great single player experiences is purchased and then all of a sudden produces Redfall if Microsoft had nothing to do with it. They could have stopped it. They could have said, no, we didn't purchase you for this. We didn't purchase you for a live service, games as a service title, because you've never made things like that before. We didn't purchase you for that, but they did. They didn't stop it. That's the point. They didn't stop it. It's like going out and saying, you got to buy a bicycle. I'm looking for a bicycle. I want a bike. You buy a bike, and then all of a sudden you're like, I don't understand why this isn't a boogie board. Why doesn't it float? They could have stopped it, and they didn't. That's the point. That's the point. And I'm not interested in this deflection to where, well, Microsoft owns the studios, but if they produce a dud, it's not on Microsoft, it's on the studio. But if they produce a hit, I bet you're going to say it's on Microsoft. Everything is on Microsoft at this point. Everything is on Microsoft. 3 Mile Island says PS5 version. Autocorrect. DDP 540 says Microsoft and ZeniMax both agreed on the direction. That is my point. I didn't even know that. But if you have a functioning brain, if the people that you purchase are working on something and it's completely opposite to what you purchased them for, they make single player great experiences. Microsoft purchased them. Nobody there wants to work on Redfall. They purchase them and then they say, what? What do they say? Continue to do what you don't want to do. Goodbye, 70% of talent. That's on Microsoft, period. There's no excuse. There's no deflection. It's on Microsoft. Period. Victor Austin says, Redfall was in development over 2 to 3 years before Microsoft bought them. Great. And they didn't want to work on it. And then Microsoft purchased them. And 70% said, we don't want to work on this. What did Microsoft do then? Tell me what Microsoft did then. Don't tell me what was happening before. What did Microsoft do after they purchased the studio that did absolutely nothing but create great single-player experiences? Why would you purchase a studio that does that and then expect them to do something completely and totally different that's going to fail? Why didn't they say, okay, you don't have to work on it anymore. Go back to doing what you want to do. They didn't do that. They didn't do it. And it's on them. Period. DDP 540 says, why did it release in this state? Yeah, I mean, it's not on nothing's on Microsoft, it seems. It seems like, I don't know where anybody, we live in the real world, folks. When you get a job somewhere, if somebody comes in and purchases your company and you're doing things that are completely and totally at odds with what you've always done. First of all, what attracted Microsoft to Arcane? What attracted Microsoft to that studio? Was it their history of live service, games as a service, multiplayer titles? Couldn't have been. You know why? Because they didn't make them. So what attracted Microsoft to that studio? And then why, after the acquisition, did they continue to do things that they didn't want to do, that they've never done in the past when it comes to other games? Who allowed it to happen? Who? Microsoft. 3 Mile Island says everything happening with Naughty Dog shows that not every studio is suited to produce live service games. No matter how talented, at least Sony has the balls to put The Last of Us on hiatus so it's not trash. That is exactly the point. This is why I enjoy PlayStation and people who are hardcore into PlayStation, because they're willing to put this out there. They're willing to call it out. Naughty Dog is a great studio. Their history is great single player experiences. And guys, you can point to Factions and tell me how great it was, right? It might have been good, but it certainly didn't move the needle compared to other multiplayer games around the same time that Factions came out. There was a small group of people that really loved it, but it was not hyper successful. That's why it doesn't exist anymore. And that's why you're seeing so many issues with The Last of Us Factions 2. That's why you're hearing things like Bungie saying this is not it. And that's why I believe that Factions 2 is probably going to be scrapped. I really do. But that's my point. Somebody within the company said, this is not working. Do something else, as opposed to Microsoft buying an entire studio that's working on something they don't want to do. And after they purchase them because they created something completely different than what they were working on. They don't say stop and go back to doing what you do really, really well. What do? They do nothing. They let them continue. They let people leave in droves, and they let Redfall release. You cannot sit here and honestly tell me that these studios are just working on their own. Microsoft is hands off. Microsoft just purchased them because they love those people that work there. They want to give them breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and they want to send them Christmas cards, and they want to give them vacation and healthcare for no reason at all. They've got no other input. They sit at home and they say, I don't know what they're doing. Doesn't matter. I don't know what world we're in where you believe that happens, but it just doesn't happen. Victor Olsen, DDP 540, ZeniMax stands on their own as a subsidiary. They haven't integrated with Xbox, only just have a mandate to be exclusive now. Again, that sounds fantastic in like some fantasy world, but it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. And if that's the case, then Microsoft is simply not doing what they're supposed to do. They're not checking on the work. Where do you work where no one checks on you? Tell me, where is this job that you can get where someone hires you and tells you, going to give you a paycheck, going to give you a paid vacation, going to give you sick time, going to give you health care, but I don't care what you're doing and I'll never check on you ever. It just doesn't exist. This pivot to defending Microsoft when something bad happens is just over, guys. It's over. It's done. The same way that we're calling out PlayStation with this Factions nonsense. Naughty Dog simply cannot create something that's a hybrid between great storytelling and live service. They're having problems because they never did it well in the past because they're a single-player, story-driven studio. The same way that Arcane was a single-player, story-driven studio. DDP 540 says it has nothing to do with the parent company, Microsoft, and their 12-month roadmap as they promised their customers. Again, I don't understand this deflection. There is no world that exists where your boss isn't expecting something from you and checking to make sure that that's done. And there is no world where someone hires you based on a particular skill set and then expects you to do something completely different from that skill set and have it work out well. And that's exactly what's happened with Arcane. There's no other way to slice it, folks. There's no other way to slice it. As bad as PlayStation is with their live service games, and they are bad, they tried incredibly hard. Yes, they had that PlayStation 3 network outage, and that hurt a lot of their multiplayer offerings at the time, like Massive Action Game, Killzone 3, even some of the Resistance games. Even without that outage, though, I don't feel like those games would have, would have really stood the test of time, compared to the other multiplayer games that were really successful at the time. Just like Factions 1, really good for a small hardcore group of people, but it didn't create that buzz that a lot of the other multiplayer games that released around the same time did. And that's why it's not around anymore. And that's why they're having such a hard time figuring it out, because they're a studio that makes great single player games. They're not a studio that makes great live service games that are integrated with single player games, that are integrated with world building. It just doesn't work. So I got to be honest, I believe Microsoft is to blame for Redfall. Anything that comes out of anybody that Microsoft owns at this point, Microsoft is responsible for. You look at the interview that Phil Spencer gave, the infamous interview where he said, doesn't matter how many great games we make, we're never going to win. In that same interview, he said, with Redfall, he kind of figured out that maybe they should interface with these companies that they own earlier on in the process of them creating things to make sure that these things didn't happen. You don't say. That's something that, that's business 101, folks. I'm going to interface with you from the beginning of this project to the middle of this project to the end of this project to make sure you have what you need, but more importantly, to make sure that you are following the vision of the project. And by the way, I hired you based on your previous work. So I'm not hiring a baseball player and expecting him to somehow all of a sudden be great at football. That's exactly what happened with Arcane. Dishonored 2, Prey, Redfall. Why? Because Microsoft allowed it to continue. If you believe that they were working on that before they purchased them, okay, great. Then they allowed it to continue. Why did they allow it to continue? Why would you purchase them? Explain it to me. DDP 540, Victor Allstein, DP540 had nothing to do with Microsoft. ZeniMax has their own staff and people watching over them, which is why I said they haven't integrated. Oh, Lord have mercy. Yeah. Okay. Great. Go to work tomorrow. Tell your boss that a couple of your friends are watching your work, so he or she doesn't have to worry about it. I've got like 4 or 5 friends here. I'm integrated with them. Thanks for hiring me, but they're going to check on my work. Not you. Don't worry about it. Everything's fine. It doesn't work that way. They can say anything that they want. Microsoft is hands-on. What's worse is they're hands-off after they purchase, to the point where you get something so bad that now we're blaming this is integrated, that isn't integrated. They're not really looking. They act independently. It just doesn't work that way. Life doesn't work that way. JGamer UK says, Microsoft has been in gaming for 20 plus years. You would have thought that wouldn't be common sense. Yeah, explain to me. Is Phil Spencer integrated with Xbox and Microsoft? Do people check on what he's doing? It's just how it works. Bethesda independent, they're doing whatever they want. No. It just doesn't work that way. It sounds great. It's a great get out of jail free card when stuff happens. It's a great get out of jail free card when you've got a social media presence on Twitter centered around PlayStation or Xbox, but it's not reality. DDP540 says, so after Todd said Starfield release date was written in ink, when did it get delayed? After a visit from their parent company? No, absolutely not. Because, Microsoft, they're independent. Microsoft is they would never do that. Microsoft would never have a hands-on approach. No boss would ever hire anybody and then expect to, have some input on their output. Never happens in real life. I don't know. 3 Mile Island says, if ZeniMax is responsible for Redfall, why did the CEO of Microsoft Gaming conduct the interview with Kind of Funny Games? Oh, I need a dirty woman. 3 Mile Island. You may have just dropped the bomb on me, baby. Yeah, right. If they don't have any say in anything, then why is Phil Spencer the one giving all these interviews talking about these studios? Why is he even addressing in these interviews the problems with Redfall? Why is he even saying in these interviews maybe the proverbial they is Microsoft, maybe they should engage with these studios that they own earlier in the process to make sure that these problems don't happen? Why? Why did he say that if they're hands off? Because they're not. This is what I don't understand from this social media driven gaming nonsense. PlayStation's responsible for everything PlayStation, everything. And Microsoft is responsible for everything Xbox with the studios that they own, period. I don't want to hear anything else because it's nonsense. DeFloyd says, Pink Floyd, The Wall. Yes. Come on now. Floyd's one of the best bands ever. Ugh. But that's my point. I just feel like at this point, I'm just really tired of the deflection. I've never heard of, I've never seen, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. You don't get a job somewhere, and the person that hires you says, you're hired, here's your pay, here's your benefits, here's your health care. See ya. I'll get back to you in a year and a half. Do whatever you want. There's no directive whatsoever for you. Do you honestly believe that that happens? And if you do, God bless you in that world that you live in. It must be wonderful, but I just can't go there. If Factions 2 releases and it is an absolute nightmare, you know who's responsible? PlayStation. When Redfall releases and it's an absolute nightmare. And you know what? The people defending this game, my profile's open on Xbox. I've got more time in that game than 99% of the people talking about this and defending it. That game is Microsoft's responsibility, period. If the staff was working on it before Microsoft purchased them and didn't want to work on it after Microsoft purchased them, Microsoft should have stopped them. Answer me that question. Hold on. J Gamer UK says, by the state of Halo Infinite at launch, I'm guessing Microsoft didn't have any input. Exactly. When do they have input? When are they responsible versus when are they not responsible? Because it's just flat out fanboy nonsense. They purchased a studio. They purchased a studio that makes great single player games. Dishonored, the branching gameplay style, the stealth, the action, the level design. Dishonored 2, Prey. Okay, Prey's not successful, but that's the game that they make. Why do you purchase them? And after you purchase them, you look at them and you say, wait, you're working on Redfall. What the hell is this? A live service game? A games as a service? Well, that's not why we purchased you, because you don't do those kind of games. Microsoft could have said that, but what did they do? Everyone left and they continued. Why? Because they want a games as a service. They want a live service game. It's on Microsoft, period. The same way when I was talking about Factions 2, when that comes out, and let's say it comes out and it's a complete mess. Of course it's on Sony. Sony should recognize that Naughty Dog just isn't in the multiplayer live service space. Could they maybe get into it? Sure, maybe. But what are the odds? Wouldn't I play the odds of them making a really great single player experience versus them making a really great live service game? I would play those odds. And J Gamer UK, I'm going to put that back up on the screen because I thought it was brilliant. By the state of Halo Infinite at launch, I'm guessing Microsoft didn't have any input on that either. Exactly. Explain to me how Halo, a storied franchise with a great story, a world as big as Star Wars, multiple stories to be told in it, how does that morph into some Destiny-esque clone with a story that's just so bad, gameplay that's worse, a world that's completely barren, built, by the way, to add content to it over time, like a live service game. How does that happen to Halo? Microsoft had nothing to do with that. They were independent. Microsoft didn't know until the end, and then they just said the hell with it. Or was it Microsoft? Was it their vision? When your boss tells you, this is what I love, but do what you want, just psychologically, that's going to fuck with you. You're going to say, well, they don't want this and we're working on it. What do we do? Let's try and give them a little bit of what they want. And that is when the content becomes bad. And that's what happened with Redfall. That's what happened with Crackdown 3. Whose fault was Crackdown 3, by the way? We want Crackdown to sit next to Halo, Gears, and Forza. That's why we're delaying it. Phil Spencer said that. And then Crackdown 3 turns out the way it does. By the way, folks, I've got more time in Crackdown 3, too, than most people. But whose fault was it? Microsoft's. There's a consistency in fault when it comes to first party. There's not a consistency in quality. There's not a consistency in expectation of quality based on past production like there is with PlayStation. There's a consistency in fault when it comes to bad releases. That's what we have to look forward to, which is why a lot of people are telling me I'm nuts that I'm excited for this showcase, because I feel like at some point you can only cry wolf so many times before everyone, hopefully everyone, says, where is this wolf? It hasn't shown up. It's been 40 years you've been talking about this wolf. Where is it? I feel like this is where Microsoft is right now. They're at that point. The wolf has to show up. We've got to see something of Avowed. There's all this talk about Fable, but they just talked about getting a senior gameplay designer. Now, last night I was on Brap, and a good point was brought up. Maybe they're just replacing an old senior designer. Could be. And maybe that means there's more of the game ready than I think, but it could mean that they just don't have one yet. After years of talking about Fable, could mean that too. So I don't know. Toolman55 says, what's up? What's going on, Toolman55? Thanks for stopping by. I appreciate it. DDP540 says, I can't wait to see combat gameplay. Exactly. Let's talk about Hellblade 2. Ninja Theory is known for what, folks? What is Ninja Theory known for? Pretty much the same thing that Arcane is known for. Why did Microsoft purchase Ninja Theory? Do you think they purchased Ninja Theory because they want live service games as a service titles from Ninja Theory? If your answer is no, when we see Hellblade 2, if there is some morphed amalgamation of single player live service in that game, let me guess, it's not Microsoft's fault. Right? So let's wait and see. Because if it is in there, it absolutely is. These employees are being told what to do. And I hope that they stick to what they do best, because Arcane didn't. Arcane didn't. And I hope Ninja Theory does, because they're some of the best at creating stories and worlds and characters. DDP540, narrative single-player experiences. Exactly. That's what they're known for, right? That's what they're known for. However, if all of a sudden they just create something, like a kart racer, it's not Microsoft's fault. They're independent. They haven't been integrated yet. That's the excuse. Tired of it. Not going to deal with it. Not going to accept it anymore. Put up or shut up. You either have to shit or you got to get off the pot. Period. And this showcase is the toilet. And I'm waiting for Microsoft to fill it. Period. Avowed. I want to see it. By the way, Rare. What did they purchase Rare for? What was Rare good at? And what did they end up doing? Nobody's fault, right? Nobody's fault but Rare's. It's not daddy saying, this is what we like, this is what we want, this is our future. By the way, everything we do hinges on a service that needs perpetual content, that needs a perpetual player base, resubscribing. It was just Rare's fault. Everwild. What the hell happened to Everwild? Are we going to see anything out of that? Been rebooted. Is it still called Everwild? I don't know. Avowed. Got to be there. Starfield is going to be there. There's a show after the show for Starfield. I'm just tired, man. I'm tired of this expectation. My expectation is to be disappointed. My expectation is to get experiences like Redfall. By the way, folks, before Redfall released, Nelson Gaming says Rare was multi-talented. They can make anything. They were multi-talented. Was is the key word there. Oh, I lost my train of thought. My expectation for this show is to be disappointed, and I don't want to be disappointed anymore. I just don't want to be disappointed. Redfall, Arcane, what did they say building up to the release? This is just like our other titles. If you're a fan of our single-player experiences and our world building, you can play this game just like those other games. It is just like that. That's what they said, folks. After 70% of the senior staff left, the veterans, that's what they said. And then the game released. I played it. I'm playing it. Multiple hours into this game. This is nowhere near a single-player game. Nowhere near a Dishonored 2, or a Prey. Not even close. But that's not Microsoft's fault. Of course not. We cannot hold Microsoft accountable, period. Because they interact with you on social media, and they're nice. Go to church every Sunday. Feed the homeless. It's Microsoft's fault, the same way that it would be PlayStation's fault. And it is PlayStation's fault. Whose fault was it when the whole online PS3 debacle happened? It was their fault. Why? Because they didn't do their job in securing the network. They went cheap. It's their fault. Whose fault was Lair? Third party, sure, but they had a hand in that with the 6-axis controller. Whose fault was that? They didn't want to pay the patent to get Rumble. Their fault. Whose fault was the multitude of games that they've had a hand in that just were bad or missed the mark or were completely head-scratchingly, why was this game created? Their fault. Anything Microsoft owns that creates games for the Xbox, exclusive games with it, wherever they go, in their ecosystem, on their console, they work for Microsoft. The output is Microsoft's responsibility. The quality is Microsoft's responsibility, period. The vision and it being realized is Microsoft's responsibility, period. Not a great way to think, to get followers on Twitter. Not a great way to talk, to be part of the quote-unquote community and get a lot of followers, but it's the truth, period. No one gets a job and does whatever they want. Everyone works for somebody else. And if the people you work for don't give a crap about what you're doing, then that's not a great place to work, is it? And that's what we're seeing from this consistency of fault when it comes to first party. And it's got to change. But I'm excited about this show. How am I excited about this show, you might say? How am I excited after all these years? Because I believe that they realize at this point that things have to change. Look, the PlayStation showcase, if you can call it a showcase, who's responsible for that turd? PlayStation. And I get it. If you liked it, that's fine. You know, I'm hardcore into this stuff. The reaction from like normal people was that the show was good. It was great. They liked the things that were shown. There's tons of games. I get that. I'm a very small use case scenario here with me. I'm hardcore. I thought that game was terrible. I mean, I thought that show was terrible. Yeah, they ended it with a big AAA game, right? Spider-Man 2. Okay. Okay, but who's responsible for that show? In my eyes, my opinion of it being bad. Who's responsible? PlayStation's responsible. And I see plenty of people saying that PlayStation's responsible, calling out PlayStation. I don't see people coming in here and saying, well, some of the studios in the PlayStation ecosystem weren't fully integrated yet. So technically it's on them, even though they're owned by Sony. But come on, guys. Right? It's Sony's fault. It's Microsoft's fault. It's Nintendo's fault when things don't go well. Nintendo wanted to sell cardboard, folks, and I'm one of the biggest Nintendo fans on the planet. Cardboard! Whose fault is that? Nintendo's. They made a decision. These companies make the decisions for the companies that they own. The developers that they own are purchased for a very particular reason, you would think. Again, let's point to Arcane. I want somebody who makes great single player, open, semi open world experiences. Who's available? Arcane. Scoop them up. Now that I own them, what are you working on? What the hell is this? Redfall. 3 Mile Island says, I like your analogy about the boy who cried wolf worry, but there will always be another year and another show. Hopefully Microsoft pulls a good show out of the bag, but who knows at this point? Yeah, you know what? No, there won't be another year, another show. 30, 40, 50-year-old men using social media to feel like they have a life is not video gaming. Crying wolf is not video gaming. DeFloyd says, Labo for life. Right, Labo. Cardboard. It's Nintendo's fault. So they purchase Arcane because they make those great experiences. Then all of a sudden, at some point, you would think maybe somebody at Microsoft went there and said hello after they purchased them. Let's say that happened. Oh, what are you guys working on? Well, wait. You've never worked on anything like this before. Let's say that Microsoft didn't want them to do that. Let's say they were doing that before they were purchased. Microsoft clearly didn't purchase them because they have a history of creating great live service games. So when they see Redfall, they say, why are you doing this? Oh, 70% of you guys don't want to do this? Okay, now that we own you, guess what? Do what you've always done. Make something great. What did they do instead? Goodbye, 70%. Redfall, live service. Ooh, that feels good for Game Pass. Live service, games as a service, baby. And then we won't check on you at all throughout the entirety of the process because Phil Spencer said that in the interview. Maybe we should learn and check on these projects earlier on, which is something that you learn when you have like junior level management positions and you work your way up to being the head of a company. That's not something that you realize one day when you're at the top. You realize that throughout your career, building from one job to the next to the next. Okay, he didn't know it. Maybe we'll check on them earlier on in the future. Why talk about checking on them? Why talk about problems if you're not responsible? Because they are. Brap says, worry, exclamation point. Brap, I sent you the link to this stream in Discord. I don't know if it will work, but I did send it. I'm trying out this StreamYard thing, and hopefully it's working. But that's my point. I'm just tired of it. Tired. And I want these games to be great. I want Starfield. You know what I want Starfield to be? I want Starfield to completely and totally own everything that I've played leading up to that game. I want it graphically to blow me away. I want the story to blow me away. I want the characters and the world building to blow me away. I want the gameplay to blow me away. I want it to blow me away. Thank God I added the word away at the end of that sentence. But that's what I want. But my expectation is that we're going to get these really kind of semi-bad Xbox 360 end of the generation character models when we're talking. Not a lot of detail in lip syncing or facial animation, and that just pulls me out of a game, especially when it's a AAA game. The big AAA release, the first one under Microsoft, was Redfall. Where do we go from there? Where does the expectation go? Brap says, "Oh, I didn't see it. I would join, but I am working." You're working? Brap is working. I can't believe it. You're usually podcasting 7 times a Wednesday at 2:15 in the afternoon. Boom, podcast. But today you're working when I'm live and I send you a link. Okay. All right. 3 Mile Island says, for Starfield, what's your predict? You know what? I am not a 30 frames per second or 60 frames per second insane person. You know, I honestly, I'm not one of those people that says if it's not 60, I can't play the game and the game's going to be bad. I'm not there. Not one of those people. I've played great games at 30 frames per second, and I've played awful games at 60 frames per second. So I don't think that one little metric here or there, like resolution, frame rate, or ray tracing, I don't think one of those little things hinders an entire game. I just need Starfield to look and play great, period, and be engaging and have a good story, good characters. Look like. I need it to look like. And I'm not interested in graphics. You know, graphics don't make a game, but the game has to look good, guys. It's got to look good. It can't look like a last-gen game. In particular, I'm talking about those character models that just look really bad when I saw them. Basement Radio Arcade Podcast says, LOL. Nelson Gaming says, I want to be whatever Brap is. He makes a good living and seems to make his own schedule. I'm all about that. Well, here I am on a, what is today? A Thursday at 9:26. So I'm getting to that point where I'm able to make my own schedule eventually. And then I'll be able to just do this all the time. And YouTube could put ads on my videos because I don't have 1,000 subscribers and they can make ad revenue, but I can't. Not that I would make anything anyway, maybe enough for half a pack of gum, but that would be great. It would give me something to chew. Arcane was always understaffed. Always understaffed. Why? And by the way, let's say that Microsoft knew that before they purchased them. Okay. After they purchased them, why didn't they fix these issues? But on Redfall, attrition also became a significant problem by the end of Redfall's development, So after they were purchased, because Redfall wasn't completed, and then Microsoft purchased Arcane, by the end of the development, under Microsoft, a whopping 70% of the Arcane Austin developers who worked on those past titles were no longer there. That sounds exactly like what's happening with another game, State of Decay. All of the devs within that studio who worked on State of Decay 1 and State of Decay 2 are gone. They're gone. So who's working on State of Decay 3? How is State of Decay 3 going to turn out? What is your expectation for it? Is your expectation based on the expectations that have been delivered in the past when it comes to Microsoft first party? Because mine are. Why wouldn't they be? DeFloyd says, with 14 kids and 2 jobs, Braps better. Yes, 14 kids. Jesus. And 2 jobs. Okay. But if he had 14 kids, you'd probably need 2 jobs between both parents, so 4 jobs total. I'm just, I need the show to be good. I really do. And I'm not one of these people that are like, console sales don't matter. Microsoft's doing great. If console sales don't matter, why are you selling a console? If your answer to console sales don't matter is it's all about Game Pass numbers, then how is a console not selling helping Game Pass numbers? You see, it doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense. Social media doesn't make sense. Nelson Gaming says Brav has 14 kids. I'm fixed with 2. Ooh, snip. Nelson Gaming, also an Xbox Live beta tester. Yeah, I was beta testing Xbox Live. Brap and I, NHL Fever. Horrible. Actually, it wasn't that bad at the time. That was a good time for Xbox. It was exciting. It was new. What do you think about this show? There are 16 people in here right now. Somebody tell me, what are your expectations, your honest expectations based on Microsoft, based on Xbox, based on its history, based on its past, based on all of these releases from first party leading up to this show? What are your expectations for this show? Good, bad, ugly, phenomenal? I have to believe that the show is going to be really good. I've got to believe it because I can't see any other way it can't be. And you can think of it this way. Look how bad PlayStation Showcase was. But essentially what they've done is they've put all the pressure on Xbox and their showcase. Microsoft is the one that can't afford to have a bad showcase. PlayStation sure can. 2-1, 4-1 in some regions. So it's time for that wolf to show up, folks. Time for the wolf to show up. Nelson Gaming says the show can't be any worse than the last 7 or so, right? When you're on the grind, can only go up from there. You would think it can only go up. But then Redfall happens. So I don't know. Maybe they're going to play it safe. Maybe they're afraid to show what they have. Maybe they need more time after seeing how bad the reception was for Redfall. Maybe they finally feel responsible. Maybe they're finally hands-on looking at stuff, making sure it's presentable. And maybe that's going to cause a lot of the things that people want to see to not be there. And by the way, I don't want to see any CGI trailers at this showcase. CGI trailers do absolutely zero. If you see a CGI trailer and you're like, yeah, man, Xbox One, you see State of Decay 3? Holy shit, man. No, I need to see gameplay. 3 Mile Island. It'll be long, boring, and most of what we want to see will be at the very end. I actually might just watch the last 20 minutes. Joking, I have to watch it all. Yeah, I mean, it seems like that's what most shows do, though, right? Everything's at the end. I mean, that PlayStation Showcase, 32 minutes of an indie sizzle reel in the middle. There are only 3 things you need to do in life: death, taxes, and an indie sizzle reel, because that's everywhere. And I know we're going to see it in the Xbox Showcase. I know we're going to see the indie sizzle reel, but I feel like, with this show, we just can't spend too much time there. We need to spend time with first party. We need to spend time convincing people that we can create. Our creators that we purchased, our studios can get it done. B Money 101 says, totally agree. No CGI. CGI is it's like showing a car. It's like showing a commercial for a movie at your showcase, Gran Turismo. How horrible is that? Who's responsible for that? Is it is it Polyphony Digital? Because they're kind of independent. It's not on PlayStation. It's PlayStation's fault, folks. 255 says, just don't have a roundtable discussion. I don't think that's going to happen. DeFloyd, I won't be watching it. I can't get time back. You're not going to watch this show? Come on. I think everybody's waiting for this show, right? They're waiting to give it an 8.5 so that they can spread negativity about Xbox, because nothing says negativity like nothing says negativity like an 8.5, right? Xbox era. Oh, so that's my those are my thoughts on Microsoft's heavy-handed approach, and it seems like it's continued. I want to see great content. Of course, we're going to see live service, But the litmus test for me and Microsoft and their ability to shut up and get out of the way of creative people is going to be the single player stuff. Is it going to be truly great, or is it going to be morphed with this live service nonsense and we get things like Redfall? Is Ninja Theory's Hellblade 2 going to be an amazing single player experience from beginning to end, or is it going to be this sort of forced into it co-op slash multiplayer kind of single player nonsense? Because if it is, the only people that are responsible for that being pushed into those games is Microsoft. Clearly, it's not Ninja Theory because we know what they do well. And clearly, it wasn't Arcane because we know what they did well. Sony's responsible for Sony. Microsoft's responsible for Microsoft. PlayStation's responsible for PlayStation. Xbox is responsible for Xbox. That's going to be it for the show. Coming up on an hour and 5 minutes. Thanks for stopping by. Jimmy Harrison says, what's up, Worry? Oh my goodness, I hope Hellblade 2 is not like that. I don't think it will be, but if it is, we know who to blame. And it's not going to be because they're sort of, well, they're kind of hands-off and they're detached. They're not really integrated yet with Microsoft. So it's really on Hellblade. It's really on Ninja Theory. It's not on Microsoft or Xbox. We know who to blame. And I'll be looking, and I'll be watching, and I'll be waiting. Thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see everybody in the next one.